All right, thank you everyone for joining us. Token 2049. Bear market, doesn't look bear to me. Looks like there's a lot of people here. Good atmosphere. My name's Itai. I'm the COO of Market Across. We are a Tel Aviv, Israel-based PR agency. And I'm delighted to be with Yves. Please, Yves, tell a bit about yourself.
Here with you as well.
Too close. I need a bit more room.
A little bit too close?
Yeah, there we go. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So
delighted to be here as well. It's pretty amazing. The energy is great. This is massive.
Cool. So tell everyone a bit about yourself and what is EOS Network Foundation?
So my name is Yves Larose. I am the CEO and founder of the EOS Network Foundation. Essentially, the EOS Network Foundation is the steward of the EOS network. It was created a year ago, reached by consensus by the token holders, by the block producers, the node validators, essentially all the stakeholders on the network, to essentially shepherd the network and kind of catch up what we lost over a couple of years of inaction within EOS.
Cool. We're going to talk a bit about that. So full disclosure, we actually work with you guys. We're your agency. And I want to actually start from the beginning. So we met about a year or something ago.
That's right.
We got on a first call. And in a place of blatant honesty, I told you that I don't really like EOS.
You weren't
I'm
the
very
only
surprised.
one.
Yeah, we had a good conversation. And then he looked at me and said, to be honest, Itai, I don't like EOS right now as well. So tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit of history, whoever doesn't know a bit of the story, and how did we get here?
So, I mean, EOS was 4 years ago when the mainnet launched, one of the rising stars, one of the shining stars in the ecosystem. Largest ICO to date, $4.1 billion, quite massive, a lot of promise of what it would be able to do, how it'd be able to scale, Gen 3, Layer 1 blockchain at a time when there really weren't any others. And tons of expectations, I think, on the network. Fast forward a couple of years, what most people don't know is that the ICO funds went to a private entity, didn't go to the EOS community, didn't go to the development of EOS in large part. And so for a period of about 3 years, we saw an exodus of people, developers, communities, basically stakeholders in the ecosystem that came to EOS because they had, there was something there. EOS attracted a lot of people.
First of all, very first to market. I think one of the biggest discussed base layers right after Ethereum, there may be Neo or whatever, but very first to market. No, there was no Solana, there was no Clayton.
Yeah, very different time.
Yeah.
Very different time. And there was so much good energy in the space at the time. The community was massive, developer community was massive. And what we saw is that over a period of roughly three and a half years or so, the funding that went to the ICO really didn't make it back into the hands of the ecosystem in the way that it was envisioned at the time. And so there was an exodus of people. And last year, when you and I met, as you say, this was quite a common theme that we were hearing when we launched the foundation and we were going out to partners. EOS is either dead or wasn't EOS a scam? Like, those are the two big things that we were hearing. And we knew that we had a massive, load on our plate in order to turn things around. And the foundation, basically, like I said, the EOS ecosystem came together. The tech was always strong. The underlying tech was incredible, but what was missing was developer engagement, community engagement, grants being sent out to the community. Basically, everything that everybody else now in this space is doing extremely well, EOS just basically died out. And so, like you said, I was also
the public sentiment was
bearish. It was very bad. It was quite toxic within EOS. It was toxic outside of EOS. And there really was, very little to do. And the idea of creating the foundation was very much a Hail Mary. Okay.
And today, you guys are celebrating 1 year of independence. What is that? What is independence? How did we get here?
So 1 year ago, we created the EOS Network Foundation, myself and Zach Gall as a co-founder right here in front. And we knew that we had a large amount of work on our plate to essentially rebrand what EOS was. EOS had a very strong core tech stack, but it was missing everything else. Fast forward a year, we were able to put in place the frameworks and the processes that essentially attracted people to EOS 4 years ago in the first place. It took us roughly a year. So as you said, we just celebrated our independence. Last week while I was in South Korea, we just had a hard fork whereby now the community, which really, EOS really embodies Web3 spirit, where the community took back essentially the power from corporate interests. And we started developing the core stack again. We now are full control of our IP, full control of the tech stack itself. And basically a year on, we've now stabilized what essentially should have happened 4 years ago. So we have everything in place that should have been there 4 years ago. One of the advantages is that we were able to look at a lot of the competitors, other layer ones out there that have been doing tremendous work. They've been really, doing some really good work in this space. How they were doing it, what were they focusing on, what worked well, but more importantly, what didn't work out for them. And so we're able to really shorten that time space in order to catch up, stabilize the ecosystem, get our independence, which just happened, on chain last week, and then set us up for the next year of operations.
Okay, so I'm going to follow up on that. Looking retrospectively after 2-3 years of, I would say, a bit of quiet on the EOS front, you have the possibility of looking at other chains that use the time that you guys weren't active to do a lot of different actions. What are you guys doing differently, learning what other people have done? And where do you think EOS could have been without that period of, I would say, quiet? Let's put it that way.
It's a good question. One of the things that EOS did very bad or didn't do, I would say it's not even that they didn't do it well, is that they were not doing, was all of the funds that went from the ICO went into a private entity, and the community was left fundless, essentially. It had no way to support itself financially. And one of the things that we've seen other L1s have been doing extremely well are creating partnerships, basically working with others in the space. If you put yourself back 4 years ago at the mainnet launch, there were so many expectations on EOS. EOS, in a way, kind of fell victim to its own success because of the token sale. And a lot of people within this space also thought they were better than everybody else.
EOS didn't cure cancer,
EOS did not cure cancer. EOS thought that it was better than everybody else, and so it didn't actually create partnerships with others. And we see, especially now, that creating relationships within this space, bridges, EVM is a really great example. Those are
We're
things.
on the Trust EVM,
That's our flagship product. Those are things that basically everybody else did extremely well that EOS did not do. I call it the reverse onion. EOS started off and it basically was playing in its own sandbox. EOS was kind of like the kid that never went to kindergarten, that never learned to make friends, which is so important in this space.
So
especially.
too cool for school.
Too cool for school. So it's just doing its own thing on its own. The tech was going to be awesome. It was going to, dominate everything else. When in reality, sure, it had some good things going for it on the tech front, especially, but a lot of other things it didn't have. And so that's what we've been doing in the last year, more so specifically, is curating the ecosystem within EOS, creating grant frameworks, creating developing developer funding mechanisms, community funding mechanisms. If there's one thing that EOS did really bad, was even to communicate inside of its own community what it's doing, where is it going. EOS didn't have a roadmap. After the ICO, after the white paper essentially, it didn't have any roadmap. Where are we going? If you wanted to get involved in EOS, how could you get involved?
The block validator was already set, it was already there,
If you don't know where we're going, how can you actually participate? How can you help? And then once you actually figure out where we're going and where maybe you can help, how perhaps could you access funding or how can you get involved? Those simple, let's say, funding frameworks were just completely non-existent. And so in that last year, basically, we celebrated our 1 year at the end of August, and the independence was last week, where we did a hard fork. That first year was all about stabilizing the ecosystem. So we created grant frameworks. We created mechanisms for the communities to access funding, it's not just the funding support, it's the non-funding support that we've seen is really lacking in this space as a whole. One thing that we see recurring is that teams are very strong at developing. What they're missing is the non-financial support, program management, project management, legal, marketing, branding, all the other things that actually make your project come to life.
Venture building.
This is really important. And so a big part of what we're doing, obviously, is the funding side of things. We've deployed roughly $40 million in the last year, direct back into the hands of the community, but also ensuring that we empower them so that once they receive the funding, and we essentially make a bet on them that if that function were to be created, if it does come about, it could create value for the ecosystem, that we support them alongside that to ensure that they reach that value creation. What else do they need in order to attain that goal? So a lot of hand-holding in that sense. And so it's a much larger framework.
How did you get involved in EOS in the first place? Like, what's your story? How did the bearded samurai get into crypto? And why EOS?
I started in crypto in 2010, mining Bitcoin, a long time ago. And I left the space when the first Bitcoin miners were rumored to come about. They weren't even out yet. And I kind of kept within like an arm's length distance of the space, but I wasn't full-time in it until 2016, came back in the space, started delegating a lot more time into it. And
I love how you use the word delegating. Like, crypto.
2017, everybody knows crypto summer was quite massive. There was a lot of hype again. This was the time that during that bull run, that essentially the space would be opening up to Web 2. This was, at the time, the idea was it's now going to go mainstream, or there's going to be a lot more real world use cases, adaptability coming about. And when I was going through the projects one by one, I was going down the list, was reading every white paper, read the EOS white paper, and I saw a lot of potential there. What EOS was promising to build, how they were going to build it, the $1 billion fund commitment, the community that was backing up EOS at the time, everything was just, it was amazing. It was, if you were there at that time, it was incredible. It's kind of like the energy that we're seeing here today. And I fell for it. I bought into this dream that EOS was going to be the next thing.
You drank the Kool-Aid.
I definitely drank the Kool-Aid. Out of anybody else, probably drank the most Kool-Aid, which is probably why now I created the foundation.
And at what point did you wake up and say, Houston, we have a problem? At what point did you go and say, all right, I understand it, but there's something in the framework that's happening here that there's a problem, and then we need to do something?
The thing is, EOS, through that year-long ICO, is incredibly decentralized. The token sale really ensured, the way that it was done with the reverse Dutch auction, really ensured that the token distribution was quite widespread. EOS is still listed on roughly 180 exchanges, and so it's very decentralized. And if anything, the idea was that Block 1, the centralized entity that did the ICO, would be effectively the foundation. So there was also a token vesting for them to ensure that they would remain involved for a period of 10 years. And so I think everybody thought that that was the role that they were going to play. And not only did we think that, that's what they were portraying, and that's what they were projecting as well. And so over, I'd say, the first year or two, that idea was still prevalent, but we were starting to see signs of maybe that's not the case.
But
maybe
code
that's
was
not
being
what happening.
added,
but
correct?
what was being told was that, right? So the commitments were still coming. You had a lot of developers coming into the space, deploying capital to build businesses, and this entity was effectively still saying, we're going to be playing our role, but we're facing challenges. But just trust us, it's coming soon. And every time the community, in a very decentralized fashion, was coming together to try and move things forward, essentially it was being squashed. It was being told, listen, if you do this, we'll let you do it, but we may not deploy the capital anymore. There's going to be ramifications. There's going to be legal ramifications, whatever it may be. And we just bought into it every single time. I guess so. I guess we just need to wait a little bit longer. It's going to come. It's coming soon. It's coming soon. And after a while of, the same pattern repeating over and over and over, you have to put yourself back at that time as well. The community comes together, because it's so decentralized, to actually reach consensus on anything is very difficult. And so you get all of this momentum building up towards, coming together as a community and saying, okay, let's do this. And when ultimately you don't, pull the plug, or once you don't pull the trigger, that momentum is lost. You lose a lot of people. A lot of people lose faith. A lot of people basically leave. And that happened on so many occasions that the momentum being built each subsequent occasion gets smaller and smaller. And you get more of a disenfranchised community. It becomes more toxic. By then it becomes obvious that, you know what, this is a scam. It's not happening. While also at the same time, having the project that at the same time is running the most amount of transactions out of any other blockchain. For the full year, we're doing it in one single day, and we're doing every single day, and we're surmounting these challenges as a community. At the time, I was a block producer.
The community is developing the tech stack, but you're saying that you don't feel the community is being
running
developed.
The infrastructure, running the nodes, essentially doing its part of responsibilities, and that part is doing well. But the underlying foundations that are supposed to be maintained by this other player, we're starting to see gaps in there. We're starting to see holes of maybe the interests aren't aligned.
So how did that initial conversation, the first conversation was like, all right, we need to actually do something. When did it become from pardon my French, from bitching around to saying, all right, let's do something, let's create a framework, let's take the power back. Walk me through that a bit.
So we had gone we'd held an EOS community conference in Rio in 2019, and the community had come together, reached consensus on deploying a WPS, a worker proposal system. Effectively, the network was going to be funding development through a process that it developed and refined over a period of time, and there was consensus on that. During that period of time was the last time when the entity essentially said, if you do this, we're out. So the community stopped. This entity said, listen, if you do this, we're going to stop, but if you wait for us, we're working on something, we'll be able to partner together, it's going to be even more massive, and essentially the interests will be aligned. We bought the Kool-Aid. That was the last time we bought the Kool-Aid. That got squashed. Very little happened. Everything was really, really slowed down. And a lot of community left at that time. A lot of developers left, a lot of the community, a lot of the businesses, stakeholders. That was the last straw for a lot of people. And fast forward about a year and a half after that, we had an opportunity again once we saw, and really the last straw, I guess, was GitHub. Because every other commitment, you could subjectively say that was being done, but it wasn't creating value. That's subjective. One thing that wasn't subjective was GitHub. The maintenance of the core code stack. In June 2021, I'm trying to find the year, June 2021 basically went dark. It's zero. You can see it, it basically goes to zero. And that was the last pillar that really kind of struck the final chord of, if this doesn't happen, if the community doesn't come together, it's done. That's it.
Why didn't you leave? There's 3 years. Why didn't you, as Yves, say, I'm going to move on to the next thing? All right, this is a dud. It didn't work out. Cut my losses. Why stay?
The underlying tech, the underlying product is real. It's insane how good it is. It's insane how we've perfected it over the last 3.5 years, where some of the layer ones right now are facing challenges that we solved 2.5 years ago.
You didn't put a restart button.
We didn't put a restart button at the time, and that's effectively what the foundation was about. And so there was this idea that there's something there. This has so much potential, and the parts that are missing are somewhat easily solvable. It's really not that difficult. There's a lot of work to do, but there's a path to victory. There's actually something there, and if somehow we can leverage the side of things that's missing, that's relatively easy in the sense that there's common known frameworks around that if we can actually do that part, and time over time again, basically I was in the midst of things as a block producer. We're one of the top ranking block producers, my previous entity, and so we were in the juice, and we could see that if we just do this, and that last straw, like I said, with GitHub essentially going dark, was the final straw. I'd actually resigned from my previous entity, and during that 2-month period, I had a lot of reflection that I was able to do. And stakeholders were reaching out, token holders were reaching out, developers were reaching out, the node validators were reaching out. You're the right person. You need to lead a foundation. If anything, EOS is too decentralized. We need centralization. We need a steward. We need an entity that can actually coordinate the ecosystem, because that's what we're missing.
All right, so let's use the last 10 minutes. We did the past, we did that. Let's talk future. We had a year of independence. Run us through what you think EOS was able to do in the past year, and what's the next year going to look like?
So we've effectively stabilized the ecosystem in the sense that we are now owners of the repo. We just hard forked last week. We rebranded the previous software stack as well. It's now called Antelope. We've formed coalitions with other chains that were also leveraging Antelope. So we now have the Antelope Coalition with other partners, Telox, Wax, UX, and EOS. We put a treasury in place to be able to actually develop the software, not only maintain it, which we've been doing, closed out all issues, but we've also then deployed funding towards what happens in the next couple of years. We've deployed roadmaps. We've deployed a lot of funding, like I said earlier, in terms of frameworks for developer funding, for community funding. We've effectively done everything that we should have been doing. We fast-tracked that for the last year. Year 2 is all about growth. So we're working on Trust EVM. That's deploying in a couple of months, essentially. We're now refining the process so that we can have block mapping.
How hard was that to get the EOS community to go and say, we actually need to adopt the Ethereum framework and mechanism in any format?
Relatively easy. I think if you would have asked the same question a few years back, the community wasn't in a situation where they were open to kind of looking externally, and that definitely hurt the community. But now people recognize
that's that partnership concept of like being
you need
like
to
interoperability is the future.
Other people are actually doing some really good stuff. There's a lot of tremendous work being done out there. And being able to leverage that, being able to partner with others, being able to actually build bridges is what this is all about.
I can't agree more. I think that the interoperability is not only a technical thing, it's also the end of crypto tribalism. The first years of crypto, was like these mini cults. This person is a Jesus and this person is a devil because he thinks the block size is different or whatever. So for you, you feel like EOS has a much more open future.
Now, definitely EOS is in that space where not only did it, within its own community, start mending bridges, within the Antelope community, started building bridges. Now we're at a stage where we're now forming partnerships with other foundations. We're building tech like IBC, not only internally to the Antelope Coalition, which is the software stack that EOS essentially manages and runs, but with the others as well, forming partnerships there, deploying capital towards the growth of that tech stack, then forming partnerships externally so that we can build bridges with other foundations, with other teams, with basically other projects that are building some really cool stuff. Because most of the community, what we see right now, they don't particularly care where they deploy. Of course, it's nice. Of course, there's different flavors. What might be a better right fit for them. But ultimately, they want to access more people, more stakeholders, larger communities. They just want to open up their product to everybody. They want to focus on their product, and they want everybody to be able to use it. And we have a role to play in there by being able to build those bridges so that essentially we can lay the roadways, we can lay the pavements so that everybody can come and leverage the tech
fact
stack,
that
essentially.
The tech stack, the exchange adoption, the brand notoriety. So today, when you do talk to dApp developers that have already deployed or pre-deployment, what's your pitch? Why EOS today? No past, no history, no whatever. Today, clean slate. Why choose you?
EOS is there to support you. Not only does EOS now control its own future, its own destiny, it has the mechanisms in place that have been built over the last year that are tried, tested, and true because we've been able to leverage on the shoulder of giants that have done this before us. Those are in place. They're not theoretical. So if I would have been here last year, I would have talked about everything that we were going to do but that we didn't have in place. We're now fortunate to be able to be here and say, look at everything we've done. These systems are already in place. They're already functional. They're already scalable. We've already deployed funding towards this. Essentially, they're already running. Here you go. You can get support here. And then we also have the team inside of the foundation to be able to help support you on the non-financial side of things, to be able to leverage your growth in the future. And what we're seeing in terms of reception from the community, from either from VCs or from developers, from basically all types of stakeholders, they're seeing that EOS is open for business again. That now people can come and help leverage the tech stack and everything that was there from 4 years ago with a network that effectively has been running for 4 years with literally zero downtime. We were, for a period of time, running 125 million transactions per day. To put that in perspective, that still remains all other networks combined in one shot. So a lot of the scaling issues that people are facing, we've resolved, and everything is open source. We will gladly work with others to get them to be able to scale. Everybody's got a different way of doing this.
That's actually a good question. So you guys have actually...
we need to help each other out.
You've built a good open source depository, and you see projects taking that open source and building their own EOS, IOS style stuff, but it's not under your, I would say, tech stack. Is that good for EOS? Is that bad for EOS? Is that at least validation that you're on the right path?
There's definitely a balance. But overall, I think we embrace it, and I think it's very positive. For others to be able to see the power of the software and to be able to then have an in, even if that's their own in, just like EVM, that's your first point of entry, and then you can see the power that underlies this product, and that you see that it's real, and then you get the other resources to become and help you. It's kind of that way in to be able to open the doors effectively. And so I see it as a mechanism to open doors. I see it as a mechanism to build bridges, which I think are really important. That, like you said, the crypto tribalism, we're seeing that change as well. We're seeing that the future is very much multi-chain. And we are part of that, and we want to be more part of that, of course.
Yeah, I think we see in crypto now a bit more of a decentralization ethos when it comes to also the star CEOs and figures. No need to go into names. EOS had their figure, other chains had their figures, and we're seeing now that a lot of them, maybe they just made enough money, but they're stepping down from the limelight and being a lot more by, I would say, for developers, by developers. So is that the underlying, is the message, the future is multi-chain and EOS is open for business?
For sure. If there's anything, is that EOS, the old EOS is not the new EOS. There's definitely a reinvigorated community. There's funding, there's the non-financial support. EOS is open for business. Come and join the new EOS, for sure.
And for people here that want to learn more, get more involved, other than, of course, following on Discord or Telegram or whatever, how can people get more involved? What actions can, I would say, devs and non-devs take to educate themselves a bit more?
All of the information can be found on eosnetwork.com. If you go there, if you're a developer, there's a tech section. You can go and apply through the grant framework. You can go and see, not only do we publish the roadmap, we actually did a lot of research, which we called the blue papers last year as one of the first things we did, to establish, here are things that others have done that might be good for us to do. Here's some base research on that. Here are base cost estimates. Here's like the general kind of RFP for this. Are you able to actually take this on? So we've got tons of items on there for people to come about. All that is public. All of the grant framework is public as well. So everything that we do, very public, very transparent, very easy for others to come and get involved and see how you fit in. One of our largest KPIs is to see in the shortest amount of time, if you want to get involved in EOS, what can you do? So it's to basically find your ikigai. What can you do? What's your skill set that potentially we can leverage, that you can get funded for? If we can find this in the shortest amount of time as possible, then effectively we can grow the community much faster than what we were doing in previous years.
All right, so last question. If we're here next year, hopefully everyone will join us. The event will be 10 times bigger. Bitcoin's at 10 billion or whatever. What's victory for you? For EOS?
For us, I think it's a recognition that EOS never left, that EOS is still very much alive, and that there's a home, essentially, that there's a home for developers, there's a home for all types of stakeholders to be able to come and see and leverage the power that EOS has for essentially what we believe is going to happen is a shift between Web 2 and Web 3. In the next large market, we think that the mainstream adoption is going to come a lot from that GameFi space. We think that it's going to come a lot from traditional developers that essentially want to have the Web 2 experience on Web 3, and EOS is ready for that. All
right, perfect. So I'm going to do something not a lot of people do. We're going to finish 50 seconds before our time. All right. Yves, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.